Almost everything you've been taught about finding prosperity may be backwards. Florence Scovel Shinn believed the mistake wasn't that people lacked abundance. The mistake was believing prosperity had disappeared, when it had only become hidden. What if you've been searching in the only place she said it could never be found? She's right. Everything changes. Because what if prosperity isn't missing at all? What if the real problem was never lack, but the way you've been taught to look? What if, little by little, you've been trained to overlook the very thing you've been asking God to reveal? Not someday. Ready. In the next few minutes, you'll discover why prosperity can remain completely invisible, even while something unseen is already moving in your favor. And you'll understand the one correction Florence believed could change the way you experience your entire life. Here's the question we'll keep coming back to. What if nothing is missing, except the way you've been looking? Florence believed most people spend their lives staring directly at what they've been praying for, without recognizing it when it's finally in front of them. She returned to one sentence again and again. She believed that if you truly understood it, you would never confuse the dust with the painting again. Judge not by appearances. Fear isn't the problem. Distraction is. Florence Scovel Shinn believed almost everyone made this mistake without realizing it. You know this scene better than you'd like to admit. The phone screen lighting up your face at 11 at night, thumb pulling down on the banking app one more time, as if the number might have quietly changed itself since the last time you looked 2 hours ago. The job board refreshed for the 4th time this week, scanned in seconds, closed just as fast. The affirmation card read again, slower this time, the way you read something when you're hoping it will finally feel true instead of just sound true. Maybe it's the mailbox you check before you've even had coffee, the phone you glance at mid-sentence, mid-conversation, mid-prayer, half expecting it to confirm something you haven't told anyone you're waiting for. The quiet math you do in your head at red lights, adding and subtracting a future that hasn't happened yet. None of this makes you foolish. It makes you human. And it makes you exactly like almost everyone who has ever prayed for something they couldn't yet see. But somewhere in all that checking, a quiet belief takes root, and it rarely announces itself. Just settles in the way weather settles in. If I can't see it yet, nothing is happening. That sentence feels responsible. Feels like patience. Sit with it a little longer though, and it starts to sound like something else. A verdict. One you've been handing down on your own life night after night, based entirely on what happened to be visible in that exact moment. Have you ever noticed that the mind rarely looks for the truth? It looks for proof of what it already believes. Expect delay, and every unanswered message becomes confirmation of it. Expect scarcity, and every bill becomes evidence. The mind isn't lying to you, simply doing what minds do. It goes looking for what it was already told to find. This is exactly why Florence kept returning to one sentence. Judge not by appearances. She wasn't talking about optimism. She was talking about perception. She wasn't asking anyone to pretend the bank balance looked different than it did, or to deny what the calendar clearly showed. That would have been its own kind of dishonesty. What she was pointing at was smaller and stranger, and in some ways more demanding. The idea that the surface of your life, however convincing, is only ever a single frame pulled from a much longer reel that's already in motion, most of it still unfolding where no one can see it yet. Picture a room you know well. Maybe it's your own. A window that hasn't been washed in longer than you remember, not dirty enough to notice on any single day, just a little duller, a little grayer, 1 week compounding quietly into the next, until the film on the glass stops registering at all and simply becomes how the light looks now. You don't decide to stop seeing clearly. It happens slowly enough that you never have to decide anything at all. Little by little, your eyes stop noticing what hasn't disappeared. They've simply stopped expecting to see it. Florence believed the deeper truth was never absent, only unnoticed, that circumstances rearrange themselves in the hidden long before any evidence reaches the surface, and that waiting for proof before you allow yourself to believe is exactly backwards. Faith was never meant to follow evidence. It was meant to walk ahead of it. The way a lamp walks ahead of the person carrying it down a dark hallway, revealing the next few steps only after you've already trusted enough to take them. You've probably lived a smaller version of this before, without ever naming it. A skill you had for years before anyone recognized it enough to pay you for it. A kindness people relied on long before you believed you had anything to offer. A door that had been unlocked the entire time you stood outside it, checking the handle, assuming it was sealed. Not lost, not late, simply unnoticed. If the visible world has only been one small frame, what has been unfolding just beyond the edges of what you've been able to see? Here's the objection that probably just crossed your mind, and it's a fair one. If nothing about your circumstances looks different today, how could anything already be happening? It's a reasonable question. It's also, Florence would have said, the exact question that keeps people waiting far longer than they need to. Think about a theater a few minutes before the curtain rises. From where the audience sits, nothing is happening. The house lights are still up, murmuring with the sound of people finding their seats. Programs rustle. Someone checks their watch. The curtain hangs still, heavy, unremarkable, giving away nothing about what's on the other side of it. The stage looks empty, maybe half-lit, definitely not ready. If you judged the entire production by what's visible from your seat in that moment, you'd assume the evening had been cancelled, or worse, had never really been planned at all. But behind that curtain, everything is already in motion. Actors are in position, costumes checked, final lines running silently through their minds one more time. Someone adjusts a prop by half an inch, out of habit, out of care no one will ever applaud. Set pieces have been moved into place in complete darkness, quietly, by people the audience will never see and will never think to thank. A stage manager counts down cues in a headset no one in the seats can hear. The orchestra has already lifted their instruments, bows resting against strings, waiting for a signal that hasn't come yet. Every piece of tonight's performance already exists. It's waiting behind a curtain that changes nothing about what is already true. None of it is visible from where you're sitting. All of it is already real. The curtain changes what you can see. It doesn't change what already exists behind it. The curtain isn't hiding emptiness. It's hiding everything you simply haven't been allowed to see yet. The same is true of the financial breakthrough you've been praying for. The one you've quietly started to assume isn't coming. Somewhere along the way, most of us accepted a dangerous equation without ever agreeing to it out loud. If I can't see it, it isn't happening. What if your bank account isn't the evidence you've been treating it as? Hold on to that question. We'll come back to it. Florence didn't see delay the way most people do. She taught that divine order doesn't wait for your permission, and it doesn't check with your calendar before it begins rearranging what's necessary. It moves first in what can't be seen. The visible evidence, when it finally arrives, is closer to the curtain rising than to the beginning of the story. By the time you can see it, a great deal has already happened, quietly, in the exact places you weren't watching. You've likely seen a smaller version of this in your own body. A broken bone set in a cast. Weeks of stillness on the outside while, underneath, cells knit new bone across the break without asking anyone's permission. The stillness was never proof that nothing was happening. It was only proof the work hadn't reached the surface yet. Now back to that question. Your bank account, your inbox, your calendar, they were never designed to show you everything. They only show you what has already reached the surface. Checking them more often doesn't make the rest of the story appear any faster. It just means you're staring harder at the one page of the script you happen to have. Waiting in fear and waiting in trust can look identical from the outside. Same silence, same unanswered questions. The difference is quieter than most people expect. One keeps rehearsing the worst case. The other keeps its hands open, no longer demanding proof before it's willing to believe. Not visible, not absent, simply hidden. And Florence believed that if something can remain hidden this completely, it can also be revealed just as completely. Which brings us to the image she returned to again and again. Somewhere, in a house that doesn't matter for this story, in a room nobody has properly used in years, there's a painting. It hangs exactly where it has always hung, above a mantel or a doorway or the back of an old armchair nobody sits in anymore. Nobody chose to forget it was there. Nothing that dramatic ever happened. It simply stopped being looked at, the way certain things do once they become part of the furniture of a life, present and invisible in the same breath. From a distance it looks gray, almost colorless. If a stranger walked through that room for the first time, they might assume it had always been that way, a plain, forgettable rectangle of muted tone, not worth a second glance, certainly not worth stopping for. That's the first mistake. And it's an easy one to make because gray looks so much like nothing. This is exactly the kind of quiet mistake Florence spent her life trying to correct in people. Not the big, dramatic doubts. The small, forgettable ones. The ones disguised as simply how things are. But gray was never the color of the painting. Gray is only ever the color of what's been sitting undisturbed for a long, long time. Imagine someone finally steps close enough to really look. Not a glance from across the room. A real look, the kind that requires standing still for longer than feels natural. Maybe it's someone visiting for the first time in years. Maybe, in your version of this, it's you, standing in front of something you stopped truly seeing so long ago that you no longer remember the exact day it happened. They notice something strange. The gray isn't smooth. Has texture. A faint, uneven softness, almost like fabric, almost like breath, settled over every inch of the canvas. It isn't paint at all. It's dust. Years of it, so patient and so gradual that it never once looked like something accumulating. It only ever looked like how the painting was. They hesitate. There's something almost superstitious about touching it, as if disturbing that gray might somehow make things worse, might reveal something even more disappointing underneath than plain, forgettable gray. That hesitation is worth noticing too, because it's the exact same hesitation that keeps so many people from looking closely at their own lives. Better the familiar gray, some quiet part of us reasons, than the risk of finding out what's really there. But curiosity, or maybe just restlessness, wins out. They reach out and drag one finger slowly across the surface. And color appears. Not painted color. Revealed color. A single narrow line cutting straight through gray, and underneath it, impossibly, a deep and steady blue, the kind that seems to hold light rather than reflect it. They stop. Stare at that one thin line for a long moment, uncertain whether to trust it. Then a hand reaches for the nearest cloth, and begins slowly, deliberately to wipe. Corner clears first. Beneath it, gold, warm and unmistakable, catching whatever light the room has to offer, as though it had been waiting the whole time for exactly this moment to catch it. A few inches over, green, the deep, layered green of something that was clearly painted with enormous care. Brushstroke laid carefully over brushstroke by someone who knew precisely what they were building. Then a curve of white, so bright against everything around it that it seems almost to glow. And beneath that, a thin, unexpected line of deep red, small, easy to miss, and somehow the most moving color in the entire painting. The cloth didn't add a single brushstroke. It only ever removed what didn't belong. Say that once more slowly, because it may be the truest sentence in tonight's video. The cloth didn't add a single brushstroke. It only ever removed what didn't belong. The cloth keeps moving. Slower now, more careful, the way you move once you understand you're not creating something, you're uncovering it. Corner by corner, the gray gives ground. A figure begins to emerge, then a horizon, then a sky that had been there all along, holding its exact shade of blue through every single year it went unnoticed. And only once the last patch of dust has been lifted away does the whole picture finally become visible. Not new. Never new. Whole, exactly as it always was. Exactly as it had been since the day it was finished. Standing quietly beneath its own forgetting, waiting for someone to remember it was worth looking at. Florence believed prosperity works much the same way. Nothing beneath the dust was new, only newly visible. Nothing beneath the dust needed to change, only to be seen again. If prosperity was never missing, what has been keeping you from seeing it? Maybe you already have a guess. Fear dressed up as caution. Doubt dressed up as realism. Old evidence from an old season, still being treated as today's forecast. Whatever the dust is made of, in your particular life, it didn't arrive all at once, and it isn't going to disappear all at once either. Take a moment if you're willing and actually name it. Is it fear of hoping again after being disappointed before? Is it the habit of checking over and over for proof that hasn't come? Is it comparison, watching everyone else's canvas look brighter than yours, without knowing what dust they're standing in front of too? Or is it simply exhaustion, the kind that makes gray start to feel safer than color, because color means you'd have to believe in something again, and believing again means risking disappointment again. You don't have to solve it tonight. You don't even have to be sure you've named the right thing. Most things lose a little of their weight the moment they're finally called by name instead of simply carried in silence. Whatever it is, it has a name. If one sentence from tonight feels true for you, write this in the comments. Not lost, only unseen. Florence often reminded her readers that spoken and written words shape attention. Putting something into words is different from merely thinking it. It marks a decision. Somewhere below this video right now are dozens of people who have spent tonight in the exact room you have, standing in front of the exact same gray canvas, wondering whether it's worth reaching for the cloth. Some of them will write a full sentence. Some will write 5 words. Some will simply type "same" beneath someone else's comment, which somehow says just as much. You don't need to explain your circumstances or convince anyone else it's true. Florence never asked her students to perform certainty they didn't feel. She asked them to practice it, quietly, one honest sentence at a time, until the practicing started to feel less like pretending and more like remembering. If you scroll even briefly through what other people have written, you'll likely find you're not the only one who came into tonight tired of searching, tired of checking, tired of treating silence as a verdict. That's not a coincidence. It's simply what happens when a room full of strangers all admit, at roughly the same time, that they've been standing in front of the same kind of gray canvas without realizing anyone else in the room was standing in front of one too. There's a quiet kind of relief in that, the kind that doesn't need to be explained, only felt. Not lost, only unseen. Write it if it's true for you tonight. Or don't, and simply carry it with you as you keep listening. The painting doesn't change because you wrote the sentence. You change the way you stand in front of it. And sometimes, that's where everything begins. There's a sentence that's been sitting quietly underneath almost everything tonight, and it's time to finally look at it directly. If I can't see evidence yet, nothing is happening. You've probably said some version of it, maybe not out loud, maybe just in the particular way you've been living lately. Cautious, guarded, waiting for proof before you'll let yourself hope. Sounds careful. Sounds like wisdom even. But look at what it's quietly been costing you. Because that sentence doesn't just describe your circumstances. It manages your entire emotional life around them. It's the reason you've stopped praying about certain things the way you used to, the specific, hopeful way, and started praying about them the guarded way instead, the way that leaves room to be right if it doesn't happen. It's the reason a small, sensible voice in you has started saying maybe this just isn't for me, before the story has even finished being written. Maybe it shows up as the application you almost didn't send, because rejection felt more likely than acceptance, and you'd rather not know for sure. Maybe it shows up as the dream you've quietly stopped mentioning out loud, not because you stopped wanting it, but because saying it and not seeing it felt worse than never saying it at all. Maybe it's simply the way you brace yourself slightly before opening an email, expecting the answer to be no before you've even read the subject line. That's the real cost. Not that you're wrong to want proof. It's that the sentence quietly convinces you to stop participating in your own life while you wait for it. Florence would have called this the oldest trick appearances play, convincing you that the current frame is the entire film. There's an old line, one Florence returned to often in her own writing, drawn from much older scripture. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Read that again, slowly, because it says something almost nobody actually believes. Not evidence of things already seen. Evidence of things not seen. The unseen isn't the absence of evidence. In this way of understanding things, it's a form of evidence in its own right, simply one your eyes weren't built to read. Think of a seed, a few days after it's been planted. From the surface, the soil looks exactly the way it did the day before. No sprout, no green, nothing to photograph or point to. And yet, underground, something is splitting open, sending roots downward before it ever sends anything upward. If proof only counted once it broke the surface, you'd have to conclude every single time that the seed had failed. Never had. It was simply still doing the part of its work that was never meant to be seen. Not lost, not late, not imaginary, unseen. Think back to the curtain, still hanging, orchestra already lifted. Think back to the cast, still on the arm, bone already knitting. Think back to the painting, still gray, color already there, waiting under nothing but dust. In every single one of those, the sentence you've been living by would have told you nothing was happening. In every single one it would have been wrong. So here's the correction, plainly, the way Florence might have said it herself. If I can't see it yet, it only means I can't see it yet. Not that it's missing. Not that it's cancelled. Not that you misunderstood something or prayed wrong or waited badly. Simply that you're standing right now, in the part of the story where the evidence hasn't crossed over into view. That single shift changes what waiting actually feels like. It stops being a countdown to disappointment and starts being something closer to what it always should have been. Trust, with your eyes open instead of fear, quietly dressed up as patience. The two can look nearly identical from the outside, the same silence, the same unanswered questions, but one of them spends every quiet moment rehearsing the worst version of the story, and the other keeps living, keeps showing up, keeps saying yes to small things without needing a guarantee first. And once you stop needing the evidence first, something interesting tends to happen to your attention. You start noticing things you would have walked straight past a month ago. Conversation that opens an unexpected door. A thought that arrives too specific to be random, the kind that doesn't quite sound like your own inner voice. A small coincidence, a name mentioned twice in 1 week, a door that opens slightly easier than you expected, that would have meant nothing to the version of you still demanding proof before belief. None of these things arrive with a label on them. They rarely announce themselves as divine order in motion. Most of the time, they simply look like an ordinary Tuesday, a stranger's comment, a slightly easier conversation than expected. It's only in hindsight, usually much later, that people tend to look back and realize that was where it started. Those aren't the whole painting yet, but they're never nothing either. What if the very evidence you've been praying for has already begun, in forms you've been dismissing every single day? Let's go back into that room for a moment, not to explain the painting again, to actually stand in front of it a little longer. Picture the cloth in your hand, damp now, gray from everything it's already lifted off the canvas. The first corner is clear, blue in one place, gold catching the window light in another. The rest is still fog. Here's the part almost nobody expects. The cleaning doesn't get easier as it goes. If anything, it gets slower. The first corner came off almost by accident. A curious finger dragged across the surface. But once you've seen what's underneath, something changes in how you clean the rest of it. You start being careful. You start noticing how much detail was nearly lost to a few careless strokes. There's a particular moment worth pausing on. The moment right after the first clear patch and right before the second one. In that gap, the painting looks stranger than it did when it was simply, uniformly gray. One bright corner of blue and gold, surrounded by a field of undisturbed dust. Not finished, not still fully hidden either. Caught in between, in a way that can almost feel worse than either extreme. This is usually where people stop. Not because the work is too hard, because the in-between stage doesn't look like progress. A fully gray painting at least looks consistent, understandable, finished in its own bleak way. A half-cleaned one looks unfinished, awkward, almost like a mistake. It's tempting to put the cloth down right there and decide that maybe the gray was simpler after all. You've probably felt this exact discomfort somewhere far more ordinary than a painting. The middle of a haircut you're already regretting, when it looks worse than either the old version or the finished one. A half-repainted room, one wall bright and new, the other three still faded, making the whole space look somehow more wrong than it did before you started. Halfway through packing to move, boxes everywhere, nothing quite belonging anywhere, the old home already gone and the new one not yet real. Nobody photographs the middle of these things. Everybody wants to skip straight from before to after, as if the messy, uncertain middle wasn't actually where most of the real change happens. Florence would have recognized this exact moment. She wrote often about the discomfort that arrives right in the middle of a change, after the old familiar picture has already been disturbed, but before the new one has fully arrived. Neither one nor the other. Uncomfortable in a way that has nothing to do with whether the process is working. It is working. The in-between is not a sign of failure. It's simply what revealing something always looks like partway through. So the cloth keeps moving. A second patch clears near the center this time, and a face begins to emerge, half-turned, caught mid-expression, painted with a kind of care that makes it obvious someone spent a long time getting the eyes exactly right. A third patch, lower down, reveals hands, folded, or maybe reaching for something just outside the frame. A fourth, and the horizon line finally connects one cleared section to another, until what had looked like disconnected fragments starts, unmistakably, to look like a single picture again. Each patch on its own would have meant very little. A corner of blue means almost nothing by itself. A stranger's face, half revealed, tells you very little about the whole. But together, patch by patch, they stop being fragments and start being evidence. Not proof that something new is being made. Proof that something whole was there the entire time, being uncovered one small, unremarkable section at a time. That's closer to what tonight has actually been about than any single explanation could get you. Have you ever noticed that the biggest changes in your life almost never announce themselves as the big moment? They looked ordinary. An ordinary phone call. An ordinary conversation. An ordinary Tuesday, indistinguishable from every other Tuesday around it. Only later, sometimes months later, did you realize that was the moment everything quietly began. Florence believed divine order almost always behaves that way. It rarely arrives wearing a crown. It usually arrives wearing ordinary clothes, easy to mistake for nothing at all, easy to let pass by unnoticed. Dust doesn't destroy light. It only softens it enough that you stop noticing it's there. The light never left the painting. Only your eyes stopped reaching it. Before tonight ends, I'd like you to do something surprisingly simple. Not to change your circumstances, just to see them differently. Because if Florence was right, those two things may not be as different as they seem. It's time for your own version of that room. Not someone else's painting this time. Worse, find a quiet minute if you can, right where you are. You don't need a pen, though it helps if you have one nearby. You don't need to move anywhere else. Just a few minutes of stillness, the kind you've probably been avoiding lately without quite admitting it to yourself. Let your shoulders drop just slightly. Take one slow breath in and let it out even slower than it came in. You're not trying to relax completely, just trying to arrive fully in this moment. Now picture your own version of that room from earlier. Not the stranger's house, not someone else's painting. Worse, somewhere in your life, there's a canvas that's gone gray from years of being looked at without really being seen. You may already know exactly which one it is. If you don't yet, that's fine too. Give it a moment to surface on its own. Start with the question underneath everything tonight. Where, specifically, have you been judging by appearances? Not your whole life. One place. One particular gray patch. Maybe it's your finances. The number that never seems to move the way you've been praying it would. Maybe it's a relationship that looks, on the surface, like it's cooling, and you've quietly started treating that surface as the whole truth. Maybe it's a dream you stopped mentioning out loud, because the current appearance of your life makes it seem foolish to still believe in. Pick one. Just one for tonight. You can come back for the others another time. Now name the appearance itself as plainly as you can. What does the surface currently look like? Say it honestly, without softening it and without exaggerating it either. The account is lower than you'd like. The conversation was shorter than usual. The reply still hasn't come. Whatever it is, name it exactly as it looks, the way you'd describe a gray canvas to someone who'd never seen it. Here's where it gets slightly uncomfortable, and that discomfort is worth staying with rather than rushing past. Ask yourself quietly, what verdict you've already handed down based on that appearance. Not what you'd like to believe, but what you've actually, secretly concluded. It's not coming. It's over. I waited too long. Whatever the sentence is, let yourself hear it. Because you can't clean dust you refuse to admit is there. Now the actual exercise. Take that verdict, and beside it, write one honest sentence that doesn't deny the appearance, but refuses to accept it as the whole picture. Something closer to what Florence would have written herself. Try this, or find your own words if these don't quite fit. This appearance is not the whole truth. Something unseen is already unfolding, whether or not I can measure it yet. Write it slowly if you're writing. Say it slowly if you're only speaking it. Not as a wish. As a correction, the way you'd correct a mistaken assumption once you finally noticed it was mistaken. If a small voice rises up right now, insisting this feels foolish or forced, or like you're lying to yourself, let it rise. Don't fight it and don't believe it either. That voice is simply the old habit of trusting appearances completely, and it's not going to disappear the first time you challenge it. It spent a long time in charge, and it isn't going to hand over the room quietly just because you asked once. It's allowed to be in the room while you do this. It doesn't get to be in charge of the room. You might notice too a temptation to check something right now. A phone. Number. The message. That's the same old pattern, showing up exactly when it's being questioned. You don't have to obey it. You can simply notice it, name it silently, and let it pass without acting on it, the way you'd let a wave pass without needing to fight it. You don't need to feel a shift right away. You don't need goosebumps or certainty, or some dramatic sense that everything has changed. Florence never promised that. What she promised was quieter, and in some ways sturdier. That the moment you stop treating appearances as final, something in you starts looking differently, and what you look at differently eventually starts looking different back. And here's the part worth carrying with you as you drift towards sleep tonight, whenever that is. The work doesn't stop when you close your eyes. If anything, some of the most important work happens exactly then, quietly, in a place your waking mind was never able to reach anyway. You've done your part for tonight simply by naming the appearance, and refusing just once to let it have the final word. Tonight you don't have to finish the painting. You only needed to make the first pass with the cloth. The rest doesn't appear because you force it. It appears because, little by little, there's less and less dust left hiding what was there all along. Here's something worth sitting with before tonight moves any further. You didn't clean the whole painting tonight. You cleaned one corner, maybe not even fully, maybe just enough to catch a single line of color underneath the gray. That might not feel like very much, but something quietly different happens once you've done it even once. Before tonight, gray was simply how that part of your life looked. Now, gray is something you've touched, something you know isn't the whole truth, even if you can't yet see what's underneath the rest of it. That's not a small shift. That's the difference between believing the gray is the painting, and knowing with your own eyes that color is already underneath it. Tomorrow morning your circumstances may look exactly the same. The account may not have changed. The message may still be unanswered. But you may notice something different. Not outside, inside. You'll notice yourself pausing before reaching the old conclusion. This is closer to what Florence meant by transformation than most people expect. She wasn't describing a single dramatic moment where everything suddenly becomes clear. She was describing something slower, and in its own way more remarkable. A gradual retraining of what you're willing to accept as the whole truth, appearance by appearance, corner by corner. That's the part worth carrying forward from tonight, more than any single line or exercise. Not a new fact about your circumstances, a new way of standing in front of them. You are allowed to still be waiting. You are allowed to still not see the evidence you've been praying for. What you're no longer required to do is mistake that gray for the whole picture, the way you might have done without a second thought before tonight. Now, the part worth being honest about. The dust is still there in places. It will probably return in places you've already cleaned, the way dust always does, quietly, settling back in over days you barely notice passing. You might do this exercise tonight, feel something loosen, and then wake up next Tuesday to find the old verdict has crept back in anyway, uninvited, wearing the same tired sentence about what's missing or what's taking too long. Maybe it happens after a hard phone call. Maybe it happens for no reason you can name at all. Just a gray morning where the old habit feels more convincing than it has any right to. That isn't failure. And it isn't proof that tonight didn't work. It's simply what living things require. A room, once cleaned, doesn't stay spotless because you cleaned it once with enough sincerity. It stays clear because someone keeps returning to it, gently, without drama, the way you'd wipe a window you actually cared about seeing through. Not out of anxiety but out of habit. Florence understood this deeply. She never promised a single prayer, a single decree, a single honest sentence written once in a quiet room would end the need for tending forever. What she promised was closer to companionship in the tending itself. That each time you return to the cloth it gets a little more familiar in your hand, a little less like a chore and a little more like something you simply do now, the way some people simply pray now, or simply breathe deeply now, without needing to remind themselves why. The 100th pass of the cloth will feel entirely different from the first, not because the dust has changed, but because you'll no longer be surprised to find it there. What's changed is that you now know what to do when you notice the dust settling again. You reach for the cloth. You don't panic. And you don't assume the color underneath has disappeared just because the gray has crept back over it. You've already seen tonight that gray was never proof of absence. You don't have to relearn that from scratch every single time it happens again. The painting isn't going anywhere. It has waited for years already. Can wait one more night. Tomorrow, you'll know where the cloth is. Before we get to the last few minutes of tonight, one small thing worth mentioning. This channel exists for exactly these kinds of evenings. Not the mornings when everything feels certain and bright, and not the loud, triumphant moments either. The quieter ones. The ones near the end of a long day, phone dimmed, house settling into its nighttime sounds, when you're standing in front of your own gray canvas, cloth in hand, not entirely sure yet what's underneath, but willing to find out anyway. If tonight found you at the right time, there will be other evenings like it. Other paintings, other rooms, other corners of your life that could use exactly this kind of attention. Maybe it's a different fear next time. Maybe it's the same one, wearing slightly different clothes, showing up again on a harder week than this one. That's really what this channel is for. More than any single video. More than any one teaching from Florence's long list of them. A place to come back to whenever the gray starts feeling a little too convincing again. Picture for a moment some future night you can't quite predict yet. Maybe it's weeks from now, maybe months. Maybe some ordinary Thursday that hasn't happened yet. A night where something has gone quiet again, where the old verdict has crept back in the way we talked about earlier, uninvited and a little too convincing, showing up right around the same hour it usually does. When the house is quiet and there's nothing left to distract you from it. And instead of sitting with that alone in the dark, you remember there's somewhere you've gone before, that spoke to exactly this kind of evening, and you come looking for it again the way you'd go back to a room you already knew the light switch of. Subscribing is simply a quiet way of making sure this room is still here the next time you need it. You're not the only one who's found their way here on a night like this. Somewhere in this same small quiet community, there's a whole room of people doing exactly what you're doing right now, cloth in hand, each standing in front of their own particular gray, at their own pace, with no deadline attached to any of it. You don't need their names to feel a little less alone simply knowing they exist. You don't need to decide anything dramatic about that right now. Just a small tap if it feels right somewhere near this video. Not a commitment to anything grand. Not a promise to watch every video from now on. Not even a promise to come back tomorrow. Just a small, quiet way of leaving a light on for a version of yourself who might need it on some evening you can't predict yet. That's the whole ask. Nothing more elaborate than that. And if you'd rather simply sit with tonight for now, that's completely fine too. Not every evening needs a decision attached to it. Some just need to be lived in, quietly, exactly as they are, without turning even this into one more thing to accomplish before you're allowed to rest. Either way, there's something worth saying before we move toward the end of tonight together. Let's go back for a moment to where tonight began. Most people spend years searching for prosperity, without realizing they've been looking straight at it all along. That was the question underneath everything tonight, the one that's followed you quietly through every room, every image, every small pause between one idea and the next. By now, you already know the answer, even if it hasn't fully settled yet, even if some part of you is still waiting for it to feel more dramatic than it does. Prosperity was never missing. It was never running late, never withheld, never handed out unevenly to people who deserved it more than you. It was simply covered, quietly, gradually, by fear dressed up as caution, by doubt dressed up as realism, by years of judging a single narrow appearance as though it were the whole truth of your life. You didn't need a miracle tonight. You needed a cloth. That's the part worth sitting with, longer than any of the rest of it. Not because it's a smaller idea than the one you might have expected walking in. 'Cause it's a truer one. Florence never promised prosperity would fall from the sky, fully formed, the moment you believed hard enough. She promised something quieter, and in the end, far more durable. That what's already yours doesn't need to be summoned. It only needs to be uncovered. The curtain, the cast, the seed, the painting. None of those images were separate lessons. They were the same one, said a few different ways, until it finally had somewhere to land. Maybe you feel a little different right now than you did when tonight started. Not transformed. Not suddenly certain about everything you've been uncertain about for months, maybe years. Just a little lighter in one specific place. The way a room feels different after even one window has finally been let in. That's not nothing. That's actually most of what change ever looks like, in the beginning. Not a lightning bolt. A single corner cleared. Tonight you didn't find prosperity. You simply stopped mistaking the dust for the painting. That's enough for one evening. More than enough, really, for a single sitting in front of a single canvas. There will be other corners, other evenings, other patches of gray waiting for their turn, whenever you're ready for them. You don't have to clean the whole thing tonight, and you were never asked to. Florence's teaching was never built on urgency. It was built on patient, faithful attention, one honest pass at a time, for as long as it took. Carry that with you more than any single sentence from tonight. Not the appearance, but what's underneath it. Not the account, or the calendar, or the silence you've been reading as an answer. The thing that was true before tonight is still true right now, and will still be true tomorrow morning, whether or not the evidence has caught up with it yet. You stayed for all of it tonight. The checking, the curtain, the cast, the seed, the room, the cloth, the corner you finally cleared for yourself. That's not a small thing, even if it feels ordinary right now, sitting here at the end of it. Most people don't stay long enough to hear an idea all the way through to where it actually changes something. Most people close the tab or the video or the thought itself, somewhere around the part where it starts asking something of them. You didn't. You stayed until the very end, cloth still in hand. If tonight changed the way you look at what's in front of you, there's another conversation here about how fear quietly trains us to keep waiting for evidence before we ever allow ourselves to believe. I think you'll want that one next. Wherever you go from here, take this with you first. The painting was never gone. It was never damaged, never lost, never given to someone else while you weren't looking. It was exactly where it had always been, waiting in the one room of your life you'd stopped walking into. You were only just now finding the cloth, and perhaps for the first time in a long while, seeing the painting for what it always was. Stay here for just one more quiet minute, before you go back to whatever is waiting for you. Wherever you are, whatever time of day has found you here, let your shoulders drop, just slightly. You've likely been holding them tighter than you realized, for longer than you realized. Let your jaw soften too, if it's been clenched without your noticing, the way jaws tend to do during long, quiet stretches of thinking. Take a slow breath in, and let it out slower than it came in. More. Now. Feel, if you can, the weight of wherever you're sitting or lying right now, holding you exactly where you are, asking nothing else of you for this one small moment. You don't have to solve anything right now. You don't have to know how, or when, or in what form. That was never actually your task. Never was. If a small part of you is already reaching for the old habit, the checking, the refreshing, the quiet demand for proof before you'll let yourself rest, let it pass gently, the way you'd notice weather outside a window without needing to go stand in it. Somewhere behind your own eyes, there's a version of the room we talked about tonight. Maybe you can still picture it, faintly, the way you'd remember a place you visited once and can't quite place anymore. A canvas, a little gray in places, a little clearer than it was an hour ago in others. It's allowed to simply sit there, exactly as it is, while you go back to whatever the rest of your day or night is asking of you. Nothing about the rest of your day needs to look different because of anything said here. The same tasks are probably still waiting. The same people, the same ordinary hours. You're simply allowed to walk back into your life carrying something slightly different than you carried in, even if nobody else in the room with you would notice the change. You don't have to find prosperity. You never did. Keep the cloth close. One day, perhaps sooner than you expect, you'll walk back into that same room. Maybe it will be a hard week that sends you there. Maybe it will be nothing in particular. Just an ordinary evening where the gray starts looking a little too convincing again. Either way, you'll recognize it immediately when it happens. The dust may be there again, settled quietly back over a corner you thought you'd already cleared. The painting will still be there, exactly as it has always been, patient, complete, never asking you to hurry back. You won't need to relearn anything from the beginning. You'll simply reach for the cloth the way you now know how to. The dust may return. The painting never leaves. So whenever the gray starts looking convincing again, reach for the cloth. It never creates the painting. It only reveals what was already there.